the idea of estate planning is something that many people go their entire lives without thinking about.
Everybody has an estate plan, and people don't realize that. It's just whether you're directing it or whether the government's directing it. I don't think that the government is ever the best person to make decisions in your personal life.
Yeah.
This entire probate process, the court is feeding off of it. Your lawyers were trying to feed off of it. And if you had no knowledge of it, you would have just... Finance, we are fresh off of our first live webinar with Joe Withrow. That should be coming out on, I think, Christmas Day for our audience. So Merry Christmas a week later by the time this comes out. What's going on, Brian?
Oh, nothing, man. Just plugging away at building some new content and working, getting a lot of stuff done. Excited for Christmas.
Yeah, I'm really excited for 2026. I think it's going to be a phenomenal year, and I guess it'll be about New Year's Eve when this comes out, ballpark New Year's Eve or so. So Happy New Year, I guess. This will be our New Year's episode. So, any particular personal or business related target resolutions for you?
Yeah, like you said, we just want to increase what we're doing here. No reason to give the exact metrics on that, but we're gonna really amplify what we're doing here. Some of the goals are really getting better at touch and base, prior clients. With just the two of us, we're bringing on some employees, bringing on some new agents, expanding in that direction, new marketing. Um, yeah, I'm really excited for what's to come. So it's going to be a good year.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I'm gonna finish out my CLU in 2026, get that designation. I'm just saying it out loud so that this time next year you can ask me, and I will have done that. But yeah, so on that note, I'm on my next course with the CLU designation, which is estate planning. So I've been starting the textbook here, and just the intro 2 pages of this textbook I thought would be a really good conversation starter to talk about estate planning, which is the course that I'm currently going through right now. And that is a topic that has come up in every course I've taken. It comes up in our conversations all the time. But we typically bring that conversation over to the trust piece and getting a trust set up and the importance of that. And we hope to have someone on the podcast soon that can talk through that actually does these trusts and has set up a company that we use about the mechanics of a trust, why you should have one, different decisions to make. But just at a broader level, the idea of estate planning is something that many people go their entire lives without thinking about. At most, they'll have maybe a will, and that is not sufficient in our estimation. Now, caveat all of this with the fact that we cannot give any kind of legal or estate planning advice. We're not CPAs, we're not attorneys. Those are people that should be on your estate planning team, but you should also be steering the ship towards getting to the understanding necessary to where you realize the value of an estate plan. Brian, have you talked to clients about, or what does the conversation look like when this topic comes up, and what does estate planning mean to you?
Well, honestly, most of the time when this topic comes up, the first answer is that's something I've been meaning to do, or I have a will. And that's the extent of it. But estate planning is so much more broad than that, and it's really thinking of in such a larger way than a will, because a will, which is the most basic thing, and it's good that you have one if you do have one. That's like step number one potentially for a lot of people. But what that does is it directs the government, the court, on where to send your things. So it keeps government involvement in your belongings. And it's better than nothing, because if you do nothing, the government already everybody has an estate plan, and people don't realize that. It's just whether you're directing it or whether the government's directing it. So if you have a will, at least you're directing the allocation of those assets, but the government's going to do the movement and making sure the assets go where they go. It's still going to go through the court system. If you have nothing, then the government's just going to determine what they think is best for your belongings. So you do have an estate plan, and from our standpoint, you and I don't think that the government is ever the best person to make decisions on your personal life. But so the conversations I have usually are, I've been meaning to do it, I want to look into that, or I have a will, and that's where we start. What
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah, that's the exact same experience. And we've gotten quite a few of our clients to go through and set up, or we've handed them off to our partner that we recommend to set up your living trust. And hopefully the goal of this episode is not necessarily to dive into the mechanics of the trust. Again, that's hopefully a future episode, but we want today for you to understand why you should consider a trust. And so let's start with a will. And so, like Brian said, there is what's called the probate process. Definition of probate: the legal proceeding that serves to prove the validity of existing wills, supervise orderly distribution of the decedent's, person who dies, assets to their heirs, and protect creditors by ensuring that valid debts of the estate are paid. Now think about that. If you don't have a will, there is a predefined process of where things will go when you pass. Part of that predefined process in this definition right here is to protect creditors by ensuring that valid debts of the estate are paid. Right? So the government's interest is in the orderly distribution of these assets, but they have a defined plan. Now you could have your own will that's different than what the government would have for you, and that's what you want. But a will is an essential part of any estate plan. It's a legal document that gives the testator, the will maker, you, the opportunity to control the distribution of property at death and thus avoid your state's intestacy laws, i.e., dying without a valid will. A will may be amended or revoked at any time prior to death as long as you're legally competent. The provisions of a will are not invoked until the death of a testator, of you. Any assets that do not automatically transfer upon your death under state contract laws, such as retirement benefits with a designated beneficiary, jointly owned property, and life insurance policies, i.e., your life insurance policies are separate from this process automatically per the state law. They will anything that's not automatically transferred, like a life insurance property or a policy, like a joint property, or like retirement benefits with a designated beneficiary, will become part of your probate estate, which means they're going to be now going through the court, which is normally distributed according to the will if there is a will. The will is the voice of the decedent, of you, directing how those probate assets, i.e., non life insurance policies, with other few, should be administered and distributed through and from the probate process. That is a will. That's the definition of a will. But as we think of it, most people understand a will is how I decide how these assets are distributed because I don't want the government doing this for me. Now, we get into the estate planning conversation. And what I'm going to do is kind of just read through the first few paragraphs of this and we'll pause and discuss.
Hold
But
on, hold on. Before you do
yeah,
that, does that mention anything about what the like before you read that, since I know you've already read it, is it going to talk about what the probate process is and what that means?
uh, kind of.
I was gonna say,
And
because
we can
let's
go
pause
more.
there, because that whole probate thing
Yeah.
is a pretty important, and having lost both my parents, when my father died, I didn't go through that. So I've only been through that once, and it was after my mother died, and she just had a basic will. So I just, if it talks about that, I'll hold off. And if it doesn't, I think it's important to talk about what probate means, and it's state to state, unfortunately. So I have to give, it would have to be a blanket idea. Every state handles it a little differently.
Yeah.
But
Well,
we
let's
can
talk through.
we could talk through that
Yeah.
if it makes sense at more sense in another place. But I don't want to breeze over such an important thing that is absolutely painful and hellacious to go through.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely be on touching a lot of aspects. Give your experience now so that we can kind of think through it. And,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the probate process, it's going to be defined by the state. And like, so where I live in the state of Pennsylvania, it was a minimum of 1 year. And as that's happening, now we didn't have anybody contest the will. We didn't have anything like that happening. So it was a very easy distribution. There's just my brother and I as the sole heirs, the sole beneficiaries of everything, all the property. But the first thing they have you do is set up a separate account. And the process is so difficult that I looked into it and studied it and tried to figure it out, but there's certain timelines where all these metrics have to be met. And it's not something I would recommend doing without an attorney, which is problematic in itself because, well, these guys were sharks that we ended up with. Wasn't a fan, but kind of stuck into a place. And fortunately, I wasn't dumb enough to just listen to everything they said. But so you have to hit all these metrics. Now, none of the assets could be distributed for a full year. So we have to take everything that's coming through the probate process and put it into an account and wait until the state says, okay, we've passed the timeline, the 1 year timeline at which assets can be distributed. So here you are, you sell a house, all that money drops into a savings account and sits and waits for a whole year because you let the government get involved and that's their process. So it's nothing but painful. And then you run into things, and all attorneys deal with this different. Some, if I could do it again, I would do it for a fee-based attorney. Others do it percentage-based. Ours did a percentage-based thing, and what they were trying to do, which I fortunately read enough and stopped them from doing, was take everything, even if it had a beneficiary, and had to roll into what the total amount of the estate was so that they could charge a certain percentage. And for example, like this is where I subverted them at one point. They wanted to include the value of the car, my mother's car that my brother was taking. And she was like, well, that movement of money is included in this. And I said, well, actually, no, because we're not including the value of this car. And she's like, well, it has a value, right? And I said, what's the legal gift limit in the state? And I think it was 15,000 at the time or something like that. And I said, so I'm gonna leave that out of the estate and as a legal gift my brother my half of the vehicle so that it can't be included in, so you can't charge me 4% of that. Like, you know what I mean? So there's all these angles. If you go through this, it's too hard to do alone because your life is going on and it's a year-long process. You're going to hire a lawyer who's likely a shark. You're going to sit on the money for a year. If you don't check the boxes at the right time, at the right pace, you can be fined and penalized. And distribution can change and that date can keep pushing to the right. Like everything about the probate process is absolutely horrible. And I just want to make that very clear. And it's why proper estate planning is real. Fortunately, we got through it all on time. We didn't have anybody contest it. So, we kind of distributed things early. And I don't even care to say that because screw the state. But had somebody came and contested that will and that money's now in our accounts, we could have gotten caught up, right? It was just like everything
But you
about
could
it was
still.
absolutely awful. And it should be a priority to never put your family through that.
Yeah, what year was this? This was
This was
2022.
2022. My mom died in July 2022.
So it's conceivable that that money could still be tied up at a blood relative because a blood relative can challenge the will. You could still be tied up, and you could be
Oh,
dealing
yeah.
with that, even though if it's like a cousin who makes the claim that again, if I'm technically outside like the legal definitions here, then I am. But so I'm not giving advice here. I'm not giving scenarios that are real. I'm just my understanding of this. If a cousin, a blood relative, who says, "Oh, actually, well, Brian's mom actually came, I loaned her money at one point, and then she said she was going to pay me back and didn't." That whether that's true or not, that could be tying this up. And this and like it's in as angry as I get when I hear about the tax, like when I read about taxation, when I read the tax code, keep my income tax handbook and the current copy of the the tax code handy on my desk here. Like I refer to it regularly, and it still makes me mad. But as mad as I get when I read about that and all the ways that they're trying to, it's just like this your deadbeat brother that always wants a handout from everything you do, and you're like, I'm going to go out into the world and provide value, and he's like, let me get a little of that, and then pulls a knife on you, and then goes and wastes the money. It's like that's the government, but at the same time, that's also these estate attorneys. Like it's a feeding frenzy.
Oh, yeah.
This entire probate process, the court is feeding off of it. Your lawyers were trying to feed off of it. And if you had no knowledge of it, you would have just hemorrhaged money throughout the process. And if you're an estate, think about this lawyer who's trying to just shyster you out of every single thing. It's like, we're not selling the car, though. It has a value, yes, but it's still a vehicle. If we sold it and then put that money through probate, I could understand your argument for you helped facilitate the transfer of an additional $20,000, but we're not.
Right.
I'm just giving him the keys to the car. You know, you can have you can have 4% or whatever of the value of the key fob. Here
Yep.
you go, 2 pennies. But imagine how excited that lawyer would be, that shyster would be, if someone did come and claim, right? If a cousin came and was like, "Oh, I loaned Brian's mom 10 grand in 1992 and she never paid me back," they're like, "Bingo," because now this drags on and on and on, right?
Oh yeah,
And
and
so
it's
you could
awful.
still be,
Yeah, and on the
yeah,
front end of that, what's crazy is what a terrible business model some of them do is like if an attorney you have to get you typically almost everybody gets their will filed and created by an attorney. Well, what some of these attorneys do, it's so unethical, is they will like just give a document, not the actual will, and they say, "Hey, we're going to keep this in our files where it's perfectly safe." And it's a long-term vision. So let's say they do this for somebody in their 60s, they know that person's probably going to predecease them. Well, you have the directions of where the will is filed. So when the family comes and says, "Hey, I'm going through my mother's stack and it says that like the proper you did the documentation, the proper documentation's with you," and it's just like, "Oh yeah, well we can help you with probate now." And they're just going to suck you in because they're like, "Well, we helped your mother prepare this. We helped your father prepare this." So there's just so many unethical moves. You really have to be prepared, and the best way to be prepared is proper estate planning, which I've changed now going forward.
yeah, keep in front of mind through all this discussion. We're going to talk about all the things you don't want to do. Just keep in mind, banner across the top, your whole life policy, your term life policies do not are not involved in this process. How long did it take you to get your mom's life insurance policies paid while the rest of this shit show was going on at this just retarded clown, circus in the background?
Of all the things we dealt with when it came to handling her estate, it was the absolute easiest. It came down to waiting the X number of days for the funeral home to get us the death certificate. Once they file that, the death certificate came. I sent a photocopy of the death, or no, I just sent an original copy of the death certificate with a death claim to the insurance company. And within a week of that, there was money in the account. It was the fastest, most seamless process, and I understand that. Like we had to wait for they want to ensure that yes, she is deceased at this point. So all you have to do is file the proper. And I could have expedited that if we needed the money. Like you can do a way to expedite the death certificate and the claim. But so inside a week, money appeared income tax free to us. It was
Yeah.
the absolute easiest thing we did.
And we're going to talk through the three places where assets can go to. We're going to talk more broad definition of estate planning. But the nightmare process you just described, the infuriating process you just described, the costly and lengthy process you just described, that's something you want to avoid. And the other thing you really want to avoid, jumping ahead to the three places where your assets could go, one of those three is the government, and they're the greediest of all. And so your goal in estate planning, when we talk about two different types of transfers, efficient transfer and effective transfer, those are the two measurements by which an estate plan is measured. I guess like how good your estate plan is it an effective transfer and is it an efficient transfer? Well, the efficiency, for the most part, refers to how little do you give this government, right? That's that when we were talking about the efficient transfer, you could lose a lot of money to the probate lawyers, right? You could lose a lot of time and money, time value of money, right? This if you're waiting on $1 million and you have to sit on it for a year and you think about what you could be doing with that $1 million now, all because you live in the state of Pennsylvania and the decedent did not leave a proper estate plan in place to preclude this 1 year because you don't have to wait a year if you
Right.
set it up now. You like that. This is the cool thing is like if you're listening to this, it means you're alive, and if you're alive, it means you can fix this today,
And
right?
if your parents
But
are alive, you can help them understand this. Oh,
right,
another key thing, because our a lot of our listeners are probably between age 30 and 50, have living parents. They're starting their own families. They have their own families, but this should be done generationally. So don't even just think for you. Like you can lovingly ask. It's an awkward conversation, but you can lovingly ask your parents to not put you through that pain if they don't want you to go through that pain. I mean,
right,
so think about this on a generational sense as well.
yeah. And so we're going to talk about the tax piece, but when we talk about the tax piece, remember not only does your life insurance pass directly to you, it skips probate. It doesn't matter if you live in Pennsylvania, you don't have to wait a year. It all goes directly to you. Also, it comes to you tax free. So, life insurance in and of itself is an effective estate plan. If you just isolate this asset of your life insurance policies, it checks 100% of the boxes of effective state planning, which is awesome. That's a very rare and unique capability of this asset that doesn't exist anywhere else. All the other assets you need to build a structure around, or you need to build a structure and then house those assets in the structure in order to capture the benefits that you get by default of a life insurance policy. So let's just define estate planning. The one sentence definition: estate planning is broadly defined as the process of four things: accumulation, management, conservation, and transfer of wealth, considering legal, tax, and personal objectives. So the process of four things with your capital and with your wealth: accumulate, manage, conserve, and transfer. How many of those are living considerations and how many are post-mortem considerations? Accumulation, management, conservation, transfer.
2 and 2.
Well, I'd
Well,
say
I guess 3 and 1, you could really
three.
think of transfer. Yeah.
I
Conservation
mean, yeah,
is, I
yeah.
think of that.
Conservation, yeah,
It could be living and post living, but
yeah,
two of them are, I would say, defined as when you're living. Two of them are, one of them is kind of both, and one of them is
yeah,
definitely post mortem.
yep. So accumulate and management. Half of those purposes of estate planning are for today while you're alive. And so
Yeah.
again, your takeaway from this, all of this conversation should be: I need to address this and figure it out now, because no one is immune from the needs of estate planning. It doesn't matter the size of your current estate. It doesn't matter your current family structure. You, if you're listening to this and you're an adult with assets of any kind, you need to be thinking about this and have this conversation. Again, estate planning is the process of accumulation, management, conservation, and transfer of wealth, considering legal, tax, and personal objectives. And then we move on to those two types I was talking about: effective transfer and efficient transfer. Effective transfer occurs when a person's assets are transferred to the person or institution intended by the transfer. So you had an effective transfer, right? Your mom intended for you and your brother to get all of the assets, no other individuals, or if there were charities that she wanted to give to, but everyone that she intended assets to go to, they went to, right? You had an effective transfer, but did you have an efficient transfer?
No. Absolutely not efficient. No.
Yeah. And an efficient transfer occurs when transfer costs are minimized, consistent with the greatest assurance of effectiveness. So, how can you achieve these goals with the least drag, right? And I consider one of the three places that your assets can go to be a drag itself, and that's the government, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because what probate is definitionally is just: how do you take the title and the name on the asset and move it from yourself to your heir, or to a charity, or to the government? Those are the three places it can go, right? And so the government, obviously, we don't want to give a single dime of our estate to the government, because they will squander it, and they will just use it to, we all like, I don't preaching to the choir here, but we don't need to really belabor the point that we don't want any of our money going to the government on our passing. I want my wife to get 100% of my dollars, and the state and the federal government to get zero of those dollars, because they're already going to get those dollars in the form of income tax down the road and sales tax, and like,
They've they've already collected that tax on that money.
right. I've been paying taxes like I'm just cycling like through a washing machine, tumble, or like a dryer, like tumble dry low, and just tax, tax, tax,
Yeah.
tax,
And the
tax.
state of Pennsylvania has an inheritance tax. It's one of, I forget, I mean, even California doesn't have that, but we had a 4% tax in a linear designation. So if I died and my stuff was, if I was a young man and my stuff was going to my parents, they would have had to pay 4% tax on that. And the same down the line. If I
Yep.
would have died and would have had to give to my brother, it's something like 15%, 12% maybe. I can't remember the exact number, but it's absolutely insane. So all this money that was potentially already taxed, he would have had to pay another 12% tax on if I didn't have a family. It's like it's so they're already gonna take their pound of flesh. So don't give them 2 pounds. It's
Right.
absolutely don't give them 2 pounds.
Do you know what the estate tax percentage is right now federally? Not even state. Not by your state has more potentially. Yours does. But the federal estate tax limit right now,
I don't remember.
40%.
I think it's 40. Is that what you said? 40. Yeah, I was gonna say I had
40%.
to go off memory, but I believe it was 40. That's nuts. But the
Yeah.
thresholds
Now,
on that are really high.
very high. They're very high now. 13 million or so right now. I think it's about to update again, but I want to say 13 million per individual, which means as a couple, you can pass on 26 million to your heirs, to your children. Now, not to anyone, to your children
Children.
without paying the estate tax. Because what happens if you try to get around this and you say, I'm going to give money to the next generation instead of my children? They have a generation skipping transfer tax. And they say, you were supposed to, we wanted you to give it to your children, but you gave it to your grandchildren. Now you're still going to pay the 40% tax because we wanted you to give it to your children. What if you're estranged from your children? What if your children are cokeheads? Like, what if you know that this money is going to get squandered and you make a responsible choice to not give it to your children? Well, the government, the the absolute clown car, like the clown show in Washington says you're supposed to give it to your children so we can get our 40%. But you say no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give it to somebody else. I'm going to skip a generation. They implement the generation skipping transfer tax because you have the person who was supposed to get the money and you gave it to somebody else. And so they're still going to get taxed. That is insane. And like what we need an army of killdozers just leveling that place because it's so preposterous and criminal. But that's not what we're advocating for. We're not advocating that you go to the scrapyard and build this epic bulldozer and mow down the federal government. We're absolutely not saying to do that, right? But should that happen if we had a moral, just society? Yes, that would happen. Should we bring back tar and feathering? Yes, of course. Should we bring back lynch mobs? You know where I stand on lynch mobs, but it's just infuriating. The most angry I've been is reading about the generation skipping transfer tax. I'd say out of all the anger that I've had in reading the tax code, almost front to back at this point, which is kind of sad to say because it's thousands of pages. But it's yeah, it's infuriating. So, anyways,
I wish I had my
you can list.
Killdozer shirt on right now that I got from Frontier Coffee. By the way, you should check them out. I wish I was wearing it because it's awesome. He
Yeah.
sells T-shirts with the Killdozer on it and the guy's quote. It's great.
Oh yeah, it's yeah. Nate at Frontier Coffee. Still trying to get him on the podcast. Go to Frontier Coffee and support. If you want to support someone that is not afraid, if you are still listening to this podcast 78 or whatever episodes later, you're not afraid to hear content that would be considered mildly offensive to most on the right, and then beyond the pale, like unthinkable hatred if you're on the left. You're comfortable with that, and if you're comfortable with that, you're gonna love Nate at Frontier Coffee. I have a subscription. I get 2 big bags of coffee a month from him. I could save money and go to Costco and get a giant, barrel of coffee. But you get what you pay for, and you support the businesses that you like, or they go away. And so, anyways, that's a little plug for Frontier since you mentioned the Killdozer, and that is one of his epic shirts.
Yeah,
Um,
awesome. You people needed to be taught a lesson.
that's right. That's right. And we're not advocating for that again.
No. But the
Should
shirt.
it happen? Would it be a tragedy? No, of course not. But we're not advocating for it. So you can stop listening to this episode now. You should be turning this off and going and thinking through your estate plan. And you should figure out exactly what you have right now. Who's it titled to? What's going to happen if, again, always coming back to, if I don't wake up tomorrow, where exactly do the pieces on the game board lie? And now let's think about, we always have that we do that thought exercise in the sense of how much money will you leave your wife effectively is like, if you're a father and your mother or your wife is staying with the children, which is the ideal scenario for every family. That's the target every family should be shooting for. If if that's you, we always have that conversation of, I don't wake up tomorrow, how does their lives change financially? But let's also talk about asset-wise. Let's talk about in the broader estate planning conversation. So I'm going to read through some of this introduction, and it's just going to spur more talking points. But you should have your takeaway. Your homework right now is to minimize the efficiency drag, i.e., don't pay the government if you can avoid it. Don't deal with your state probate laws. Don't die intestate, God forbid, out of all of this, which means you don't have even a will in place. But you have some homework to do. You need to take care of this. But I'm going to just jump in because this is a really good, simple thought, walkthrough of why, further walkthrough of why you need an estate plan. You got anything else anything else on the killdozer or,
No.
all right, all right. This is the start of the textbook here. It's just a couple of really solid paragraphs. Many philosophers and great thinkers have contemplated the inevitability of death and taxes. Benjamin Franklin is known for his famous saying that in this world, nothing is certain but death and taxes. Despite Mr. Franklin's words of wisdom, there's often uncertainty when it comes to both death and taxes. While no one likes to plan for their own death, the fact remains that no one lives forever. Unless we prepare for our deaths, there's uncertainty as to where our assets and liabilities will end up when we die. That's a big one, too. Remember going back to they want to make sure creditors are paid off. So liability is something we need to think about as well. The best way to eliminate some of that uncertainty is by having a properly prepared estate plan that incorporates planning for the accumulation, protection, and disposition of wealth. Estate planning is complex. Among other things, it's about planning for risks, including the risks of untimely death and its consequences, ill health, artificially sustaining life, inability to manage property, immaturity of heirs, and the application of state intestacy, i.e., dying without a will, rules that may be inconsistent with a person's wishes. In large measure, estate planning is about the transfer of property either during life or at death, the methods of effecting those transfers, and the risks associated with those transfers. Estate planning is also about the process of growing old or not, and the planning for the financial consequences of each possible outcome. It's a good pause point right there. That just sounds so similar to the conversation we have in life insurance, but there's more to it. Immaturity of heirs, we brush on that, but this is something huge here, right?
Yeah. And even special needs circumstances. A lot of families have special needs children. Like, do you want the government through the probate process determining how they're cared for, where that money flows, making, maybe you wanted to keep extra provisions for them because you know that they're going to need long-term care long past you're dead, but you have one unethical children of the four who doesn't care about that and wants equal share. That stuff needs to be determined ahead of time while you're alive. Your best interests are taken care of. It's the immaturity
Yeah,
thing is huge, but as well, that just put me in the mind of special needs, because what if they are all mature, but one of them is going to require certain care? Huge.
right.
The government doesn't really care how good their care is. They're just going to care that they get care. And we've all
Yeah,
seen the level. Like, just think about a nursing home. Look at the low level nursing homes versus the ones for people that are proper prepared for that and can pay the money. It's going to be the same thing for a special needs child. They're going to get the absolute bottom of the barrel care if you didn't expressly state how your assets should be allocated towards that.
yeah. My buddy that here on the island, his father-in-law passed away a couple months ago at 92, and it got to the point he was living in their back house. Got to the point where he needed full-time 24/7 care. They had a live-in nanny with him for a while, and that worked. Then they had, someone who would come over for 6 or 7 hours a day. Like, they had tried all combinations. Eventually they had to put him into place. And when that time came, they were looking at the different options, and the one that was the 5-star, and they had no, like, expenses, no issue for them. 50 grand a month doesn't matter. Whatever, I don't know prices of nursing homes, but like, this was the top of the line, as the most you could possibly spend. Money is not an option. You can write a check for any amount monthly that they want. But that one was full and they couldn't get in. And so that's another thing to think about. So they had to go into a lesser one, which is still by most of our standards like obscenely expensive. But just the stories from it, it's like he wasn't happy there, understandably. And I think, at a certain point, like, the quality of life, just because of his mental state and physical state, had just deteriorated so much. But there's a lot of things that we talk about when you're having this estate planning conversation of how do you want to be cared for at that age. So again, it's beyond just the financial side. Like, you should,
Yep.
you know, we can be preparing, and when we talk through the life insurance discussion, we're talking about the financial side almost exclusively. But these things, like immaturity of heirs, like what kind of home do you want to be in? Do you want to be in a home at all? Continuation of life, are you going to be on life support? Those are things that you'll work through in your trust document that should be outlined in your estate plan. Another one, immaturity of heirs, is one thing. Like, adult children who aren't ready to receive the money, that's one thing. but also age of majority or age of minority, aka minors or adults, or as the law said, adults have attained the age of majority. And so, if you have, and this is a thing that some of our clients and listeners should get on the phone with us about, because first couple years of doing this business, it made sense to me because I hadn't really thought through it and I hadn't done a lot of the work and studying in the textbooks. The insurance companies can't pay the death benefits to a minor directly. And so a lot of our clients, and myself included, and I have changed this now that I have the trust in place. If you have, say, your spouse as your primary beneficiary and then your children as equal contingent beneficiaries, i.e., if you outlive your spouse, so she's no longer there to receive the funds, or he, um, then the contingent, the next layer of beneficiaries, becomes who receives those funds. If your spouse is still alive, they'll get the funds. If not, it goes to the children. Well, if you put minors on there, the company can't pay the minors. And so you're basically reintroducing a lot of these inefficient transfers. The effective transfer is still going to happen. It's going to get to your children, but not efficiently because they can't pay them. And so it behooves you to either have a trust. Ideally, have your trust as the contingent beneficiary. We not legally suggest, but that's what makes sense to me, is having the trust as your contingent beneficiary. So that I'd rather just go straight to my wife, because it does. An insurance contract is in itself a form of a trust. Like, it's going to go to my wife, guarantee, without tax, without delay, all these issues, right? The same thing a trust could do. I don't need my life insurance policy in a trust. It doesn't do anything except simplify if I have a lot of policies. It itself is going to go to my wife. So I don't need the trust to be the primary beneficiary. It's just going to go to my wife anyways. But if my wife is no longer here and is going to go to my children, I want it to go through to the trust as the contingent beneficiary, which my friend, the same guy I'm talking about, is the trustee. He will distribute those assets and make sure that they're provided for. If you have your children as contingent beneficiaries, and I've lately, in the last year or two, I've pretty much talked most clients out of doing that because it's not efficient, and we're reintroducing a lot of these issues here. But if you still have that from early policies that you've done with me, let's have a conversation about finding a trusted adult that you can have as a quote trustee, even though in reality it might be like your mom or your dad. It might be a sibling that you trust that you know would be taking care of your kids anyways, that you trust would use the money. But ideally, you should have this trust set up and have that as a contingent beneficiary, because you go through the same thought process, the same considerations, but now it's much simpler. And that person is required legally to distribute those assets, not
Yeah,
you leave it to them and hope. Right,
yeah,
the trustee has to just
and I want to inject something there on that. Leave it to them and hope is even discounting the fact that maybe when somebody comes flush into a lot of money, they start to it manipulates their mind. Maybe it's somebody you totally trust. Maybe they are totally trustworthy. So exclude the fact that maybe something would go wrong in an unethical sense. The trust is superior because it directs exactly how that money goes, and when they're of age to receive it, they can. You can run into some complicated things, like let's say you have teenage children who could receive that money in just a few years. Maybe you don't want them to because they're not mature enough or whatever, but how does that uncle get that money to them without again incurring government oversight, taxation, transfer of the money? Like you actually introduce another layer of challenge in that transfer of wealth, because now if that was your beneficiary, that's their money if it wasn't in a trust and it wasn't pre-directed. So like if Hans had put me as his number one contingent beneficiary and said, "Hey, if Stacy and I die in a car accident, I want you to take care of my kids." Well, when they're of age, I've got to figure out how to get that money to them. And it's not going to be easy. The government's going to want to know why I'm transferring millions of dollars to people without
right.
them being involved. So that's actually not even an optimum. It's probably better than the government just automatically being involved because the kids can't get it, but it's still far inferior to a trust because it's just going to introduce future problems. It's a
Yeah, it's putting a burden on you because I'm putting
Yeah,
now, you have this capital and you have to figure out gifting it to them, transferring it to them. You have to transfer them your money that you got from the policy.
yeah,
Whereas if I identify you as the trustee, it's the trustee's money, and my children are the benefactors of this trust. You just have a job. It
yeah.
can be a paid job or not, but you have a job of just executing the desires of that I had that I put in place through the trust. And so that's like, again, if you have your children as contingent beneficiaries, and that's something that I set up, let's let's hop on a call and change that. And we can change. You have the right to change the beneficiaries while you're alive, and your primary beneficiary is hopefully still alive. So it's not like we need to do this second, but we never know what's going to happen. We don't have a lease on life, and so that's a conversation we should have.
But first, you
Continuing
should
on,
probably have a
yeah,
trust.
yeah, you should have a trust. Yes, get that
Yeah,
going for
you
sure.
should probably get that done and then change your beneficiary.
And email info@remnantfinance.com. Say, hey, I have no idea, but I listened to that, and I like no idea where to go. Just how do I set this up? And we'll connect you to the right people that can
Yep,
set that up for you.
happy to
Again,
do
we're
that.
not attorneys. We don't do trusts, but Brian knows. If Brian, if someone emails me, I refer them to Brian, and he sends them to the right people. But we will get you to the people that you need to have a conversation with to set this up. If we knew exactly what we would face in the future, we would arrange our financial affairs, prepare our families and loved ones, get our financial records in order, identify who is to receive what property, advise our relatives what to do if we are unable to make our own decisions, select someone to make critical healthcare decisions for us, confide in someone about our funeral and burial wishes, select someone to care for our children, provide for our children's education, and provide for our spouse. We would evaluate whether we could, in good conscience, leave money or property outright to particular heirs, or whether we need to have someone else protect them from themselves and others. That's a like a really good thing to think through. If you haven't done that, again, that's just kind of highlighting everything we've been talking about. That paragraph is like this episode in a nutshell. All right, here's a really good thought exercise because we say, "What if you don't wake up tomorrow?" all the time, right? You don't get any time to adjust. You don't get any time to plan. And that's stressful because it's like, okay, well, I can't get on your calendar until next Tuesday, and then I emailed about the trust, but well, what if Brian's flying and gets back to you in a couple of days, and then it's like, what if I don't wake up tomorrow? I'm screwed, right? But this is a little bit more of a much more statistically likely compared relative to not waking up tomorrow outcome. But it's kind of, I think, a better thought exercise. Consider what would happen if you knew you would die in exactly 5 years. So it's 19 December today for us as we're recording. So December 19th, 2030, we're both gone. The question that you would face is, what do I do? As an individual, you may be young, middle-aged, or older. You may be married, single, or divorced. You may have no children, minor children, adult children, or a combination of both. And I'll add, like you said, special needs children. You may have a low net worth, medium net worth, or high net worth. You may require small or large amounts of money for consumption over the next 5 years. You may be healthy right now, or may be in poor health. You may prefer a traditional burial or cremation. You may wish to exhaust your entire financial estate by artificially sustaining your life, or prefer no artificial sustainment of life. You may wish to provide for your spouse and heirs if you have any, or you may not wish to provide for anyone's support. You may wish to leave money to charities or not. You may be tax adverse or indifferent to taxes. If you give some thought to the above demographics, attitude, and goals, there are an endless number of permutations. Estate planning is concerned with addressing the different demographics that each of us face and the risks associated with them, our goals and the risks and likelihood of achieving them, and various attitudes towards planning and our motivations and the consequences of action or inaction. Estate planning involves developing a plan that fits the particular individual and meets the individual's goals and objectives. What would you do if you found it, like if that was like 19 December 2020 or 2030? That's your last day. Like, what do you do? What do you do tomorrow?
It's a good question. It's a great question. I'd probably quit my other jobs at first
Yeah.
just to make sure I'm spending the time, but then I would absolutely start preparing for that inevitability. So, really focus your time of how you're going to live those 5 years, number one. But I would absolutely spend some time in those 5 years making sure that everybody's prepared for my absence. And like that says, every iteration of possibilities, every permutation of possibilities for when I'm gone. I would have that drawn out. But the thing when thinking about that is like, if you had a deadline and you knew, it's easy to do because it becomes very aware. But none of it. I could be gone in a year. I could be gone tomorrow. It
Yeah.
should be done.
So I think I thought through this yesterday when I was reading this, and all right, I got 5 years. It's like a panic-inducing thought, But then you kind of take a deep breath and you're like, all right, I got a little time.
Mhm.
Now I want to spend as much time as possible with my family. So how do I reorganize every other priority or every other thing that currently takes up my time? Some of those things will still be on, like they'll still be on the calendar. Like I'm still have to live, right? In these 5 years. But how do I prioritize spending time with family and shuffle everything else down so that it is the minimum necessary that I need to do outside of that and optimizing the things that really matter? Financially, how much life insurance do you get?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you just knew that date was coming and you still qualified, like if nobody else knew that date was coming and you're healthy, and you would get every penny you possibly could.
Yeah.
You'd get
Yeah.
all
What
the
if,
life insurance you could possibly afford and up to your full human life value. Everything the insurance companies would be willing to write on you.
yep. Yeah, I would be looking at, all right, here's the last time I calculated my human life value. I'll tell you for me, I initially did it when I got my first policy. I was still in the Navy and I had not done any business with remnant finance. I calculated my human life value, years remaining, times my current income in the Navy, roughly, ballparked it, and got a number. And I got a whole life policy and I got term for the rest, convertible term. Then there was a period where I was still in the Navy. I knew I'd be getting out and I was earning income through remnant finance. And so I had a larger income that I could show. And because human life value is based on that snapshot in time, I knew I'm going to lose a significant chunk of guaranteed income in June 2024. So I recalculated my human life value. A few years had gone by, but the amount of income, just because anything on top of what I had, it overcame that couple years lost in these two equations. And so I got another convertible term policy to max that out. Now, that number for me was $5 million at the time. If I was going to die in 5 years, I would look and I would try to figure out, a couple years have passed since then, but what possible income can I show? I want to do a new calculation of my human life value. And a call I had recently, we determined about $5 million was his human life value, but not really interested. I don't need death benefit. I need infinite banking. I need cash value. I need policy loans. Okay. That's under the assumption that you're going to live this full life, right? That the things, what are you using policy loans for? To invest and grow it, most likely, right? To be a better banker. Why do you want to be a better banker? To have more capital available to you. Why do you want more capital?
So you can have
To have
more
better
time.
savings, better investing. Why do you want more better investments? To have more money. Why do you want more money? Why do you want any money at all? To
Freedom,
to
control,
do
and
the things you
time.
want to do.
Yep.
To do exactly those things that if you had 5 years, that you would move to the top. Trips with family, right? Like think of a trip you've been wanting to go on. You would move that to the top of the list, or it would be much higher than it is now in the priorities. I only got 5 years to do this trip to Croatia, to do this hike, to climb this mountain, whatever it is, to take my daughter to whatever. Like those things all shuffle to the top quickly. And the reason we have this conversation of wanting policy loans and cash value, and I don't care about the death benefit, is because we think we're going to have plenty of time to do that. But all we're doing with money, the reason that we talk about not being in mutual funds, not being in a high yield savings when you could be doing this, like do this and not this, anything you look at, no matter what the conversation is, velocity banking, HELOCs, mutual funds, IUL, VUL, whole life, stocks, options, all of it is for more money, higher amount of money. But that money just translates to those things that shuffle to the top of the list when you now have 5 years to go. And so when someone says, let's just stick with 2 million, that's plenty. My wife will be fine. Well, okay, now you're dying in 5 years. Do you think if we got that news, that individual would be right back on my calendar? All right, let's get the remaining. I need at least 5 years of term. Give me
Guarantee
the
they
minimum
would.
term I can get, but of course they would. Of course they would.
Yeah,
And
and,
so,
and
yeah,
would they put another nickel into a mutual fund?
no,
Oh, not a single
no,
nickel. Yeah.
no, you never, no.
Maybe I'd continue trading because that provides me some income now, and I would probably really heavily prioritize teaching my wife to do it so she could continue to earn on the money that's going to come. So that would probably be the one thing on the investment side of the house that I would continue. Like you're saying, I would maximize life insurance to the penny knowing that that's going to transfer to my family and maybe teach them how to manage that going forward. But I certainly wouldn't be worried about the wealth curve at that point. It would
Yep.
be about the transfer curve. I mean, I'd probably still do things. Like I said, I would trade. I might still buy investments that will transfer. Yeah, of course. But certainly a mutual fund is not even going to be, it wouldn't even be something I would think about again. I wouldn't even talk about it on this podcast. I'd be like, it's just
No.
such a useless metric of my money, time, and effort.
Yeah, I would say I've only got 5 years left. I don't have 30 seconds to talk about this product that requires 60 years of maturation to maybe to maybe provide taxable income when I withdraw it and just and sell it.
Yeah.
And then the chunks that I sell get taxed, and then that money comes to me and I do what I'm going to do with it, like these trips, like these things that now move to the top of the order. It's like,
Yeah.
that's all it is. And so mutual funds would never come up again. And I would, if someone mentioned it, if someone talked about index funds, any of this stuff that's beyond my 5 year time left, I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't have that conversation because it's pointless. And so I think that adding this, I think thinking through this, like what would change in your life today, personally, how you spend your time, and then also how do you allocate your capital. I think this 5 year exercise is probably better than the what if you don't wake up tomorrow, because again, that just induces panic and a very
Yeah.
statistically unlikely, you know, rush to action. Like you should rush to action from this, but but do it smartly and don't just buy the first thing you see to check a box. Like this is a conversation to have, and this could take a few months, but I like this 5 year time frame because it does really put things into perspective. Like I got time to go do this trip. I'm gonna go do this trip. I'm gonna take my daughter here. I'm gonna take my wife here. We're gonna go have this experience. Those things all change, and that's the kind of thing that we're gonna think through. And then when I'm gone, post 5 years, they still need to live, and so there's a conversation, I guess, there about like thinking beyond the 5 years as far as the assets for them. But why why would I put $1 into something that has the possibility of growth over the long term, when if I know I'm going to die in 5 years and the death benefit is going to pay out, I can multiply it 20, 30 times guaranteed and then pass tax free today. It's like we're just jumping up the curve here. We're skipping all those 30 years of growth and maturity that you would need to then liquidate and sell taxable equities. Like it's not even that we're not even having the same conversation here, and that's just, that gets back to like so often the checkers versus chess comparison. It's oh man, who has time for well, if I put the money in here, I'll have more when I'm 60. I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
No, ain't nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
It's dumb. It's like it's inefficient, eh, you know, really on all fronts. But all right, wrap this up. This last few paragraphs here. It is easy to make the case that everyone needs estate planning. However, most people concentrate on developing a good financial plan for life. In developing a lifetime financial plan, people typically assume they will live to their full life expectancy or beyond. Unfortunately, many do not. The next step most people take is to plan for the financial risks that exist during life. They buy life insurance, health insurance, disability insurance, long-term care insurance, property insurance, and liability insurance to mitigate against these financial risks. Those are all good decisions while you're alive. Assuming that all those risk management techniques are adequate, individuals then turn their attention to saving and investing to achieve both short and long-term financial goals. While estate planning is incorporated into all of those tasks, it also concerns itself with the individual person. Anyone can become unable to make their own healthcare decisions. Anyone can become unable to care for themselves physically, financially, or psychologically. Estate planning involves the transfer of property, which will be addressed throughout this text, but it is about so much more. Estate planning is about being prepared for the expected and the unexpected while taking into consideration your individual demographic and family profile, your assessment and objective assessment of risks. Your assessment, what you think they are, and what an expert would say they are. Like you think through this, but then don't take your own word for it, because if this is the first time you're thinking through it, you're missing a lot of things, right? Just like you get exposed to the power of a whole life contract. Don't try to start one to create one yourself, because there's so much more that you don't know. You're just realizing that there's so much you don't know. So think through this, assess yourself, but then have someone else assess you. And that's not us. That's an estate planning team. But we'll connect you to people who
Point you
can
to
start
them.
this ball rolling for you. Um, so your assessment and an objective assessment of the risks, goals, values, attitudes about property, heirs, taxation, charities, and life itself. A well-designed estate plan will be very much an individual plan, considering all of the issues mentioned as applied to each particular person. Go ahead. Okay.
All right. Oh,
Sorry, you go ahead.
yeah, but
Fill the
be
dead air.
and again, I'm just going to come back to something we've been talking about more and more lately, and you can point back to our episode Heritage over Inheritance. But when you think about like that 5-year plan, like your estate plan is important for the assets and the things, but also think about in the event that you're gone tomorrow, what have you left your family in terms of the things that are really most important? And your the family, the faith, the ideas around fitness, friendship, and finances. How have you enriched their lives and something they're going to carry on without you? So that needs to become primary to incorporate things like the core values of your family into that estate or into a separate binder that they can look to. Write your family, your kids, your spouse, an I love you letter that is timeless, regardless of their age. You can write multiple ones through their lifetime, just explaining, what they mean to you and all that kind of stuff, because I guarantee it's something they cherish when you're gone and something they can always look back to, your words, because words matter, man. Words carry a lot of weight. Um, yeah, so take care of that stuff because like Hans was saying, if you think about that 5-year objective, what would you put to the top of that? And that's the thing you should also probably start focusing on more now, even with the expectation to live to life expectancy. Because if it's if your calendar would change drastically, knowing you're going to die in 5 years, your calendar probably should change now. And I'm equally guilty of that and need to exercise that more as well. It's not always easy,
Yeah.
but it's necessary because that tells you what is truly important and if your focus is there.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
There's the idea in stocks that if you hold on to a stock, escapes me the guy who put this idea out, but I can't remember his name. But every day you don't sell a position, you're agreeing that it's worth purchasing at that price. And it gets into the sunk cost fallacy and the idea that, well, I need to hold this until it at least recovers and then I'll sell. Well, no, if you're doing that, you're agreeing that you would, and there's obviously like, this is not a blanket statement. That's not just true in all cases, but it's a good way to think about it. Would I buy this today? And if I wouldn't, at these current prices, why am I still holding on to it? I'm making a decision to continue to buy it basically. Um, and in the same way, if you think about your calendar, if you had 5 years, would you choose to do the things you're doing? Would you, and like having some conversations recently, and the reason I love this job so much, two reasons. Had brunch with some buddies, some Navy buddies who are now 05s, kind of figuring out their last 4 or 5 years in the Navy, got to do the 20. And so you're on the hook and they get you because your tours line up to where you're not going to get out, at least in aviation, you're not going to get out at the 20-year mark because your tour is going to end conveniently always at around the 18 and a half, 19-year mark. Right. And so you got
22.
to do another tour if you want to make 20. Hey, you got to make that 20, right? And so the aircraft carriers are full of O5s that are doing their last tour, and it's a C tour because that's the next in the rotation. It just works out that way. So you have a lot of like pretty disgruntled, ready to get out O5 pilots on carriers because of the way they set that timing. So I was having lunch with some guys who were sort of approaching that next tour. And, well, if I go here, I don't have to deploy, but I got to go to Dubai for a year. Or if I go to this job, I'm solo. It's unaccompanied order, so I can't bring the family. But then I only have to do 18 months. Or the other option is stay here in San Diego, but it's a 3-year deploying tour. Like these kind of conversations, and I'm just thinking, I am so glad to not be having this conversation right now. Could not pay me. There's not enough money in the world that would get me to go back into the Navy, particularly right. But also, I'm glad to be doing this job because you could go through an entire life of being interested in personal finance, of being what I would have considered, very astute in financial planning for, not like certified, but like from a personal, just very interested in it, read about it. Everything I listen to podcasts, even back then was still all finance. Everything I read about still all finance, but from a different lens. And you could never, ever, ever be exposed to this conversation right there because it always stopped at buy some term in case something happens to you, and then let's just go grow your money and invest. And that is the extent of a lot of it. Uh, is just get a little term, protect, you leave your wife a nice little check if you die early, but you're gonna be fine. You're gonna make it till retirement age, and we're gonna build this retirement nest egg, and you're gonna live off for. It's like it's such a stupid conversation. It's a retirement ink, as Joe Withrow calls it. It's such a stupid, stupid conversation. And I think like a lot of things that paradigm is kind of dying off. And I hope that it dies sooner than later because people need to be thinking through this and need to be having much more uh, in-depth and nuanced conversations about their finances. It's not just about growing the largest pile of capital when you're 7. Like that's just a dumb way to plan. And so I love that getting to do this job has exposed me to new ways of thinking and challenging my old paradigms and incorporating these things that are so like imagine if I had died 5 years ago before all this. Like imagine if, you know, that was what I had left my family. Maybe a disaster. I'm still like trying to improve all this stuff. I'm still just getting my contingent beneficiary on my policies to be the trust, right? I've had the trust in place for a while. Like it's one of those things that even as I'm reading this, I'm still falling into. I have my trust, I have my policies, I've got these boxes checked, but I know I need to transfer. It's like I've had it on my pending to-do list. Add the contingent beneficiaries, or add the trust as my contingent beneficiary on my policies. I'm still in the process. I'm submitting it today, but I've been sitting on that for like 6 months, and so with all of this exposure, with all I do, spending my time outside of like family time, all my free time working and reading about this stuff, I'm still falling short.
I think
So
Nelson talked
imagine,
about that. There was a certain
yeah,
law,
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah,
Parkinson's law, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
we're
it's
all
like
guilty.
have this conversation, schedule a call with us to talk, even if you have policies already. Like let's just talk through, let's play. I mean, of course, what if you don't wake up tomorrow, slap a convertible term policy as a stopgap and then have this more nuanced conversation? I have 5 years to live. Let's talk through priorities of time, priorities of capital, and then let's go through some more in-depth conversation. And then also at the same time, be having this conversation with the folks at Legacy Lock who Brian referred to, because you need to have this buttoned up. I don't care if you don't think you need to, you do. If you could see the future, you will be glad if you do this, you'll be glad that you did. And if you could see the mess you leave your family if you don't take care of this, I think that's a failure as a husband and a father. So
Cool. I don't have anything to add to that.
cool.
I
All
agree.
right.
All right, man.
All right. Cheers, y'all. Happy New
Happy New
Year.
Year, everybody.
2026.
Thanks for listening to Remnant Finance. If you found any value at all in this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend.
Remember, true financial freedom comes from taking control of your personal economy and breaking free from the status quo. So stop being a passenger in your family's financial future.
Boldly take back control of your wealth. Until next time.
This is Brian and Hans signing off.